Let's start today by looking at a completely normal corporate scenario, but, through the lens of human biology.
Oh, I love doing this.
Yeah.
It really puts things into perspective.
Right. So picture this. You are sitting in a conference room, or, maybe you're one of a dozen floating heads on a high-stakes virtual call.
Which is honestly sometimes even more stressful.
Exactly.
Hmm?
And the manager pauses and asks the group, hey, does anyone have a solution for this? And instantly your brain just connects the dots. You have the answer.
A genuinely brilliant, elegantly simple idea just flashes into your mind.
Yeah, but instead of actually opening your mouth, your sympathetic nervous system just kicks into overdrive. Your heart rate spikes, you freeze.
And just sitting there running this massive risk analysis on every possible way the sentence could sound stupid.
Yes. And while you are internally debating this, the agonizing, inevitable thing happens. A colleague chimes in, and they share your exact idea.
And the whole room lights up.
The manager praises them, they get this visible win, and you are just left sitting there with a really visceral sense of regret.
It is a brutal phenomenon. You are literally watching your own intellectual property be claimed by someone else.
Yeah.
Simply because they had the mechanical ability to vocalize it 10 seconds faster than you did.
It's so infuriating. And it's exactly what we are deconstructing in today's deep dive. We are pulling insights from a really analytical guide called Mastering Professional Presence, specifically the Workplace Meeting Guide.
Yeah, we're really going to break down the actual mechanics of meeting presence today because, this isn't about just being a natural extrovert.
Oh, yeah.
It's about understanding the underlying psychology of why we freeze in the first place and equipping you with a systematic approach to bypass that anxiety.
So the overarching mission for our deep dive today is to move you away from this idea that confident communication is just some personality trait you're either born with or you aren't.
Exactly. It is a completely learnable skill. We are going to look at the invisible barriers keeping you silent, how to physically and linguistically hack your own confidence, and ultimately, how to transform from a passive observer into a high-impact contributor.
I love that. So let's start with the root cause, right? The psychology behind that freeze response. Because when we look at the source material, it identifies this whole cocktail of fears that trigger the paralysis.
Right. It's never just one thing. There is the fear of making a grammatical error, which is huge, especially if you're speaking in a second language or even just in a highly technical, jargon-heavy environment.
Oh, absolutely. And then there is the fear of harsh judgment. And above all, there's this pervasive cognitive distortion that tells you, well, everyone else in this room is smarter, more informed, and just more qualified to speak than I am.
Yeah, that specific distortion is tied to what psychologists call the spotlight effect.
The spotlight effect, right.
Yeah. When you are sitting in a high-stakes environment, your brain basically tricks you into believing that everyone is scrutinizing your every single move. You assume the room is hostile.
Like they're all just waiting for you to mess up.
Exactly. But the core insight from our source material flips this entirely. The reality of corporate dynamics is that almost everyone in that meeting is experiencing their own cognitive overload.
Right. They're not thinking about you.
Not at all. They are agonizing over their project deadline or the constrained budget or simply what they have to do immediately after the call. They are fiercely focused on the agenda. They aren't sitting there with a magnifying glass hunting for a slight grammatical stumble in your sentence.
That reframing is just huge. Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy. Holding on to a great strategic solution, but staying silent because you are worried your phrasing isn't like Shakespearean. It's like having the winning lottery ticket, but refusing to cash it in because you think your handwriting is messy.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
Right. You are doing a disservice to the team. The value is in the utility of the idea, not the flawless delivery of the syntax. The company just needs the solution.
Right, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where we have to look at how to circumvent that anxiety systematically. Because the anxiety stems from asking your brain to do way too many things simultaneously.
Yeah, it's just too much processing power required all at once.
Exactly. If you walk into a meeting cold, the moment an opportunity to speak arises, you're demanding your working memory to process the ongoing discussion, invent a new idea, translate that idea into acceptable corporate language, and manually override your body's social anxiety.
All in the span of 3 seconds.
Yes. That is a recipe for a total system crash.
So the intervention actually has to happen before the meeting even begins. The text outlines preparation not as this vague concept of, doing your research, but as a highly specific tactic for cognitive offloading.
Right. You look at the agenda beforehand. You formulate 2 or 3 very specific points or solutions.
You actually identify the vocabulary you'll need to articulate them, and you literally practice verbalizing them.
By pre-packaging your contribution like that, you are dramatically reducing the cognitive load required in the moment. You only have to execute a pre-written program rather than trying to write the code live while everyone is staring at you.
Which is so much easier. That pre-packaging shifts your brain from a reactive state of panic to a really proactive state of purpose. You aren't walking into a minefield hoping you survive. You are walking in with a specific tool ready to deploy.
Now, let's say you've done that prep. You have your idea ready. The source material points out that there is a critical mechanism at play before you even open your mouth to deploy that idea.
Oh, the physical stuff.
Right. We have to look at how nonverbal cues dictate the reception of your words.
Because human communication is overwhelmingly driven by heuristics, right? Those mental shortcuts our brains use to quickly assess a situation.
Exactly. Your physical presence sets the heuristic for how your ideas will be judged.
Oh.
The text emphasizes what it calls silent communicators.
Like maintaining upright posture, holding steady eye contact with the speaker, keeping your hands visible and relaxed.
And strictly avoiding crossed arms or a defensive slouch.
Okay, I want to push back on this slightly, or at least play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
In a purely logical, data-driven corporate environment, say a steering committee for an engineering project, does it really matter if my arms are crossed? Like, if I have a spreadsheet that proves a 20% efficiency gain, the math is just the math, right? Shouldn't the objective value of the idea outweigh my posture?
In a utopian world run by algorithms, yes. The math would be all that matters.
Yeah.
But you are presenting that math to humans, and humans are governed by evolutionary biology.
Right, we're basically just apes in suits.
Exactly. The text doesn't argue that your posture changes the data. It argues that your posture changes the filter through which the data is processed.
That's a filter. That makes sense.
When you cross your arms and sink into your chair, you are physically protecting your vital organs. It is an evolutionary signal of defensiveness or disengagement.
And people pick up on that.
Subconsciously, yes. The people in the room pick up on that signal. So when you finally speak, you are starting from a deficit. The audience has to overcome their subconscious impression of you as defensive before they can even begin to evaluate your 20% efficiency gain.
Wow. That completely changes the stakes. You are essentially forcing your audience to do extra mental work just to trust you.
Exactly.
And there is a physiological feedback loop for the speaker, too, isn't there? Proprioception, how our body position tells our brain how to feel.
Yes, absolutely.
If you sit up, uncross your arms, and open your chest, you physically alter your breathing mechanics, and you actually lower your own cortisol levels. You are hacking your own nervous system to feel grounded.
That feedback loop is essential. And, the other half of this nonverbal equation is active listening. The text highlights this, not just as a polite courtesy, but as a real tactical advantage.
Right. Active listening isn't just nodding politely and smiling. It is actually gathering intelligence.
Yes, because if you are entirely focused on rehearsing your prepackaged idea in your head, you aren't actually tracking the flow of the conversation.
Which leads to one of the absolute most credibility-destroying moments in any meeting.
Oh, I know where you're going with this, right?
Finally working up the courage to speak, only to suggest something that a dominant senior VP already suggested 10 minutes ago.
It's so painful. Active listening, like maintaining eye contact, synthesizing what is actively being said. It ensures your contribution is actually accretive.
It builds on the current reality of the room.
Exactly, rather than awkwardly pulling the conversation back to a point that has already been resolved.
Okay, so let's map where we are for the listener. You've offloaded the cognitive burden through prep. You are sitting openly, you're managing your cortisol, and you are dialed into the tactical flow of the conversation.
You ready?
But now you reach the absolute highest point of friction, breaking the silence. How do you actually physically insert yourself into a moving conversation without causing a total train wreck?
This is where so many people trip up. The failure point here is that most people believe they need to enter the conversation with a fully formed, flawless monologue.
Like they need to give a TED Talk right then and there.
Right. They think they need to take complete control of the room in one single breath. But the source material insists on the exact opposite approach. It advocates for starting small.
You don't need a monologue. You just need to get on the board.
I like to think of this mechanically like driving a manual transmission car.
Oh, I like this analogy.
You have this massive engine of an idea, and you have the transmission, which is the fast-moving conversation of the meeting, right? If you just drop the idea straight in, the car stalls. It jerks, it's awkward, and it fails. You need a clutch.
You need a mechanical tool to smoothly match the speed of your idea to the speed of the room.
Yes. The entry phrases the text provides, these short professional sound bites, they are the clutch. That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. An entry phrase allows you to initiate the physical act of speaking, which breaks your internal seal of silence without demanding high-level cognitive processing.
It gets the vocal cords vibrating.
Exactly. The text gives a literal toolkit for this. If you want to contribute, you use a standard low-stakes phrase like, "I'd like to share an idea," or simply, "in my experience."
And it's even easier if you start by validating someone else first. Like, that's a critical point, and it makes me think about you are using their momentum to get yourself going.
The guide also provides these clutch phrases for high-tension moments too, like disagreements.
Because disagreeing with a senior colleague is terrifying for most people.
Oh, absolutely. The natural instinct is to either stay quiet or be overly blunt and defensive. But if you have a preloaded phrase, something like, "I see the value in that approach, but I'd like to suggest an alternative perspective," you instantly de-escalate the other person's amygdala.
You aren't attacking their idea, you're just adding a new lens.
All right. It is a highly professional maneuver that gets your voice in the room while maintaining absolute psychological safety for everyone involved.
Even asking a clarifying question is a massive value add, isn't it? If you say, "Could you unpack the timeline on that a little more?" You are contributing.
Definitely. And statistically, if you are confused by a point, there are probably 3 other people in the room who are also confused but are just too scared to ask.
You become the proxy for clarity.
Exactly. You are utilizing these phrases to smoothly enter the flow. But once you have the floor, once the clutch is engaged and you are accelerating, you have to manage the actual mechanics of delivery. How you control your voice and pacing really determines how the idea lands.
This is where we need to talk about speed, pitch, and the absolute toxicity of perfectionism. Because the source text puts a massive emphasis on speaking slowly and clearly, utilizing pauses, and deliberately calming your pace.
It is a critical instruction because it actually runs counter to what our nervous system naturally wants to do.
Right. When you are anxious, your sympathetic nervous system is screaming at you to just escape the threat.
And in a meeting, escaping means finishing your sentence as fast as humanly possible so the spotlight moves off of you.
But I have to challenge the perception of speed here for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you look at high-stakes environments like Wall Street, Silicon Valley tech sprints, even just fast-paced agency culture, the people who dominate the room often talk incredibly fast. They rattle off data at lightning speed.
They do, yeah.
It creates this aura of hyper-competence, like their brain is just processing at a higher clock speed than everyone else. So doesn't speaking slowly risk making you look, lethargic or less sharp?
What's fascinating here is that it is an incredibly common misconception that fast equals fluent. And while there are certainly environments where rapid-fire speech is used as a sort of dominance display, it is terrible for actual influence and clarity.
So it's more of a show than effective communication.
Exactly. The text separates perceived dominance from effective communication. When you speak too quickly, a few mechanical failures happen. First, you drastically reduce comprehension for your audience, especially in diverse teams or on virtual calls with audio compression.
Oh, totally. Virtual calls with fast talkers are a nightmare.
Second, you actually outpace your own brain.
Yeah.
Rushing forces you to use filler words, you stumble over syntax, and your pitch naturally rises, which signals anxiety, not authority.
So you are basically signaling to the room, hey, I am uncomfortable taking up your time.
Precisely. A calm, measured pace with deliberate pauses projects deep authority. It subconsciously tells the audience, my ideas are valuable enough to warrant this time, and I'm comfortable holding this space.
That ties directly into the next behavioral trap the text warns against, which is how we handle the pressure of that space. It's what I like to call the apology trap.
The apology trap. I see this all the time.
It is staggering how many brilliant professionals completely sabotage their own ideas before they even state them.
It is a defensive mechanism, really.
Right. It's the impulse to start a contribution by saying, I know this might be a stupid question, but... Or, I'm not the expert on this, so feel free to ignore me, but...
We hear it constantly.
Psychologically, we do this to lower the bar. If we tell the room the idea might be bad, and it turns out to be bad, we haven't lost any status. We beat them to the punch.
But the mechanism backfires completely. The audience doesn't think you are being charmingly humble. They actually take your disclaimer at face value.
You are literally instructing them to devalue what you were about to say.
The text is absolute on this point. You must strip these apologies from your vocabulary. Replace them with a neutral, authoritative entry phrase, something like, "I'd like to suggest an approach." It requires you to tolerate the vulnerability of standing behind your idea.
And part of tolerating that vulnerability is accepting that you are going to mess up sometimes. You are going to use the wrong word, you're going to lose your train of thought, or your voice might waver.
And that's okay. The guide treats mistakes as statistical inevitabilities, not moral failures. Every executive, every seasoned speaker makes grammatical errors or stumbles in live conversation.
The differentiator is the recovery.
Exactly. If you stumble, the protocol is mechanical. Stay calm, correct the word if it fundamentally alters the meaning of the sentence, and just keep moving forward.
Do not spiral into apologies.
Right. The audience retains the overall confidence and the structural value of the idea. They immediately discard the minor syntax errors from their working memory. Grace under pressure builds significantly more professional presence than robotic, tense perfection.
So let's pull all of these mechanics together and look at what this actually looks like in practice. The source text provides a transcript of a real-world application, right? It sets up a scenario where a manager is asking a team for ideas on how to improve customer satisfaction metrics.
Yeah, and the employee in the example utilizes a very strict structural algorithm to deliver their point. They say, "I'd like to share a suggestion. I think we could collect customer feedback after every service interaction. This would help us understand their concerns and improve our service. That's my suggestion. Thank you."
It sounds so simple, but when you look under the hood, it's a total masterclass in structure. There is zero rambling. It follows a rigid start, idea, end formula.
Yes, very structured.
First, they use the clutch phrase to enter, "I'd like to share a suggestion." Then, one and only one clear idea, post-service feedback. They provide the mechanism of the idea, understanding concerns to improve service. And finally, they execute a definitive conclusion.
That conclusion is where a vast majority of professionals fail, unfortunately.
The dreaded trail off.
Exactly. People will deliver this brilliant insight, and then the adrenaline of speaking just sort of runs out, and their brain just abandons the sentence.
Bandwidth. So, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Whatever you guys think.
It completely deflates the authority of everything they just said.
It's like running a marathon and then just sitting down 2 feet before the finish line.
It really is. The text emphasizes closing the loop with a definitive hard stop. That is my suggestion. Or I'd be eager to hear the engineering team's thoughts on this.
You put a neat professional bow on the contribution and explicitly pass the baton back to the room.
Because communication in these environments is not a mystical talent, it is a highly structured game. It is a formula. And because it's a mechanical formula, it means it can be practiced and perfected outside of the high-stakes environment.
And that practice is critical because you can't just understand this intellectually, right? You have to build the neurological pathways. You have to literally myelinate the neural circuits associated with speaking up so that when the adrenaline hits in the boardroom, your body just knows what to do.
The text recommends relentless practice in zero-stakes environments. And we aren't talking about casually thinking about what you might say. We're talking about actual verbalization.
Like reading professional texts allowed to get your mouth accustomed to the cadence and vocabulary.
Exactly. Recording your voice on your phone while you explain a complex workflow from your job, and then playing it back to audit your pacing and your use of filler words.
You can practice the start, idea, end algorithm while you're driving your car. Just saying out loud, "I'd like to share an observation regarding the Q3 budget." You go through the motions so that the mechanical act of taking a deep breath, sitting up straight, and projecting a professional phrase feels deeply familiar to your nervous system.
You are training your body that this action is safe.
By the time you are in the actual meeting, you aren't fighting a full-blown panic response, you are just relying on muscle memory.
Muscle memory is everything here.
This has been a deeply practical exploration. Let's synthesize the core mechanics we've uncovered today from the source material for everyone. We started by dismantling the psychological barrier, the false assumption that the room is a hostile entity judging your grammar, when in reality, they are just trying to get through the agenda.
We looked at how prepackaging your ideas acts as cognitive offloading, shifting you from a state of reactive panic to proactive purpose.
We analyzed the silent communicators, how adjusting your posture isn't just about looking nice, but about changing the subconscious heuristic the room uses to evaluate you, while simultaneously regulating your own cortisol.
And we discussed active listening as a tactical tool to ensure your contributions are actually highly relevant.
We introduced the concept of the clutch using standard entry phrases to smoothly break your internal seal of silence and de-escalate tension. We challenged the idea that speaking fast equals competence, leaning instead into a calm, measured pace that commands authority.
And we strictly outlawed the apology trap.
Yes, no more apologies. Finally, we broke down the structural algorithm of a contribution start idea and emphasizing the critical importance of the definitive hard stop and how verbal practice in zero-stakes environments physically wires your brain for boardroom confidence.
It is a complete paradigm shift. A meeting is no longer a gauntlet of potential humiliation. It is simply a structured mechanical environment where you apply a formula to add value.
The source material leaves us with a compelling final thought, stating simply, your voice deserves to be heard. True executive presence doesn't require you to be the smartest person in the room. It requires the foundational belief that your unique perspective has utility.
If you are at the table, you are invited because your specific lens on the work is necessary for the company to function.
Which brings us to a final, provocative question for you to carry into your next meeting.
If you accept the premise of the text, that your ideas possess genuine strategic value, then what is the actual quantifiable cost of your silence?
Wow.
How many compounding errors is your team making? How many elegant solutions are being left on the table simply because you are withholding your contribution while waiting for your phrasing to be completely flawless?
That is the ultimate reframe right there. Don't deprive your team of a winning solution just because you are intimidated by the mechanics of sharing it. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Take this algorithm, prep that one insight, use your clutch phrase, and go claim your space in the conversation. We will see you next time.